Joining us is your friend and mine, former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, I want to rip right into this story here that came out this week. Your predecessor at the White House, John Kelly, has sparked some controversy this week after claiming that on a trip with Donald Trump in 2018, that Trump expressed admiration for Adolf Hitler and once said, well, Hitler did a lot of good things. Now, Mick, you know Donald Trump. What do you reckon? Yeah. Surely this isn't true. And why do you think, though, that John Kelly would come out with such a bizarre story?
James, it's hard to know where to begin on this one. Let me tell you what I know. I saw that interview on the CNN network here in the U.S. and was just outraged by it. I've spent just as much time with Donald Trump as John Kelly, probably more. And I never saw that language, even that inkling that Trump was going there. And for Kelly to say this about the former president of the United States and the future candidate of the United States is simply irresponsible. Why? He hates him. He just does. He's hated him ever since he hated him while he was working for him. In fact, I've often commented I thought John stayed too long because he lost the ability to respect the president of the United States. This is a former chief of staff. In this country, this is a pretty big deal. This is a high-ranking position. I've been told it's the rough equivalent of a 4-star general in the military, and John was exactly that. So he should be taking his responsibilities as an ex-chief of staff a lot more seriously. Listen, I criticize Donald Trump from time to time. When I do so, I try to be respectful about it. John Kelly needs to do the same.
Yeah, well, indeed. And I think, we all know in this country as well the power that the chief of staff to a prime minister has as well. It's a very powerful position. But I want to move on to another story this week here, the TikTok story here. Now, remarkable news about the bill to ban TikTok or allow the government to make it not be controlled by the Chinese company ByteDance, I guess, in the U.S. That's passed the House of Representatives. But Donald Trump, he's been opposed to the ban, despite that, only 15 Republicans voted against it. Walk us through a bit of the debate here, because I think it might be a little bit more textured than some people are saying that it's just a straight TikTok ban.
Well, it certainly is. And it's always going to be a lot more textured in a country that has such a powerful First Amendment and free speech rights like we have ingrained in our Constitution. But the dynamic here is fascinating to me as just someone who watches politics. Donald Trump actually started the ball rolling against TikTok back in 2018, 2019, and for good reason. He was worried about the Chinese government having access to huge amounts of data on American citizens. He was also worried about the level playing field. So many of our platforms, Twitter, Facebook, are not allowed to operate in China. So Trump was saying, why would we allow theirs to operate here? That's what started this. And of course, the House and the Republicans in the House and many Democrats took it up as well, as you mentioned, and it passed overwhelmingly. Only 15 Republicans voted against it. I think a total of 65 people voted for it. So there were 350 odd people who voted for this thing. You don't find that level of bipartisanship in Washington, D.C. these days. But Trump came out against it just before the vote, and no one can seem to understand why, other than perhaps his visceral hatred of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook Meta. I think that some of this is just personal animosity between the former president and Mr. Zuckerberg, and I think that probably factored in here. You since heard Trump, by the way, slowly sort of refining his position and saying he still believes that TikTok, if it were to be a security threat, should be banned, et cetera. So he's sort of moderating his position on it today.
But, Mick, how much of this is a bit of a proxy for a bigger issue? Because it's not just TikTok and their surveillance, but TikTok and their ability to pump propaganda into young people and, all sorts of crazy stuff about gender and politics in the Middle East. And, there's a debate that seems to be going on between people who think, as I do, that TikTok and these other tech giants like Meta need to be brought to heel for what often amounts to assaults on our society and our youth and our democracy. But there are those who say that the way this law was written, it would allow the president to say, oh, well, TikTok, it's got too much foreign influence. Maybe we ban that. Who's right here?
Keep ban it. I don't think it's entirely accurate to call it a ban. It could be,
sure,
okay, under certain circumstances. But I think the most likely thing is that it ties into what we call CFIUS, which is the investigation we do when any critical U.S. assets are being sold to folks overseas. If an Australian company buys an important American company, then there'd be an investigation as to whether or not it would be in the national interest for America to allow that sale to take place. We have a long history of this. We didn't let the Soviets buy General Motors back in the 1970s if they wanted to. So we've had these type of protections. The typical remedy, James, is that you have the company, say the Chinese company, would have to divest. They'd have to find a buyer for TikTok and sell it to somebody else. And already today, folks, including the former Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, have announced that they're trying to put teams together to buy TikTok if it comes to that.